The topic is the perpetuation of the revolving door syndrome, and we have to talk about the so-called revolving door syndrome, Reverend KWalker. And of course, Reverend Walker, let's pick up during this second segment and give you an opportunity to talk about a system that is all a part of this revolving door system, and that is the parole system. Let's talk about parole in the state of Tennessee.
Well, one of the things that I want to say about that is, when I'm talking about perpetuating the revolving door syndrome, we always look at crime in our society. Politicians run on, let's get tough on crime, let's do this and let's do that. But I don't believe people really look at Dr. Haney, why do we have this revolving door syndrome? Why is the recidivism rates the way that they are? And why is the truth not being told concerning the recidivism rate when in reality the most people that do in actuality reoffend and come back into the prison, over 50% of those people are go back on technical violation. That means they don't go back with new charges. They go back because they failed to meet up with some of the conditions of their parole. And what I'm saying is this: when it comes to that revolving door syndrome, I believe that the parole board plays a role in perpetuating that, in the sense that, first of all, on the back end, there's not adequate supervision or of the ex-offender when they come out. There are not enough things or not enough programs that's out there to help. And then the programs that are out there to help, the parole boards are not working close enough in conjunction with those programs to make that transition from the inmate to into society a successful one. And then on the other side, coming out the door when they meet the parole board. Now you take, for example, you take inmates, and Dr. Haney, I have sat on parole boards, man, for the last 10 years or so.
Let me interrupt. But parole, when you talk about parole board, are we talking about several boards, or is that just one general board for the entire state of Tennessee?
It's one board for the entire state, for the state of Tennessee, and they go to the various institutions. I think it's a total of 7 parole board members. In most cases, they will send out a hearing officer who would hear the case and then make a recommendation as to whether they would recommend parole or deny parole. Then it'll go in for, they had to have at least, I think, 4 votes in order to come out or be declined. And what happens is, in the parole process, an individual will go in, and mind you, the purpose of incarceration is for punishment and rehabilitation. An individual will go before this parole board, and I think it's good to know, what their mindset is in regards to the crimes that they committed, bringing them into the system. But at the same time, okay, if you take an individual that's been incarcerated on a charge for, he's been in there for 15 years. Okay, well, 15 years, that's punishment in prison. If you're in prison for 15 years, you're punished, okay? Now, what needs to be looked at is, what has that person done during that 15-year period of time? Have they involved themselves in the various programs? Have they gotten their GED? Have they picked up a skill or a trade or anything like that? And why not look at that, what they've done while they're in there, to be a determining factor as to whether or not this individual should be released. But more times than not, Dr. Haney, what's happened is, you got a parole board that's acting like they're the judges in there, and they're actually going in here pretty much retrying the charge.
That's what it appears.
And it's not their role. I don't know if it's an ego thing or what it is, but it's not their role to go in there and retry these people, and then a lot of them being turned down for parole who are eligible for, who are qualified. I mean, parole is a privilege. It is not a right. But privileges are something that you earn, and it should be based upon what you've done while you're going through your punishment for the crime you committed. And if you have proven yourself to be rehabilitated, then why not release? Well, what happens is, and what I mean by perpetuating the revolving door syndrome, is that the parole board is more likely than not to parole somebody with a bad negative institutional record than they will with somebody that has a good institutional record and has spent sufficient amount of time in the system. Now, I don't know what advantages them to do that.
Well, that's what I was about to say. That's almost setting a person up to fail.
Well, he's coming back. And Dr. Haney, I'm not just talking. I've sit on the parole board. I mean, I sit on the parole board with a guy, and this guy actually sit there. And if I had been a parole hearing officer, I would have denied it. Because he sit there and talked to himself out of parole, and they paroled him anyway. And he got out, and he wasn't out hardly no time before he reoffended. He came back with a new charge. You know what I'm saying? But they paroled him. They knew they knew this guy wasn't going to go out there in society and act right, but they sent him anyway. But then you take, for example, I recently went to the parole board with a guy, been incarcerated for 5 years now. I mean, we went up earlier part of the year, and they said, okay, we got to get some stuff worked out on your cases. There's a conflict with the charges on your sentences. So that got worked out, went back to the parole board about 3 months later, and then they both hearing officers recommended him the first time, recommended him this time, and then when the cats found a vote, they turned him down. But now this guy, he's sufficiently served his time in terms of the punishment phase. He has been rehabilitated, he's been in the program, he don't have the write-ups and all that stuff like that, but then they put him off for a year. Why? Because they know he's not coming back. You know what I'm saying? So the people that's going to come back, get out.
Get out, and the people who might not come back, they try to keep them as long as...
Absolutely. And there's another gentleman, Dr. Haney, down in another institution, and I don't want to call these guys' name because the parole board, the way they're doing this guy already anyway, I mean, if I mention his name, they probably retaliate against him, you know what I'm saying? But anyway, this man's been locked about 34 years. I mean, out of 34 years, this man only had about 4 write-ups, and they're minor write-ups. I mean, he's completed all kind of programs, even started an organization to help other inmates while he was in there. I mean, the whole night, 34 years, sufficient as punishment, man. He's been punished, 34 years in prison, he's punished. But in that 34-year period of time, he has rehabilitated himself. I mean, go to the parole board, man, he got all the, correctional officers coming out in support, man, had a psychologist, had a psychological evaluation, and not only did he send the paperwork, but he was up there himself with the paperwork talking about it, and they still let this man, decline this man, but people with similar charges that had bad institutional record, that even had attempted assaults against correctional officers, had been paroled, spending less time than this guy in prison, man. It don't make sense.
Did they give any kind of justification, or any kind of reason why they did not wish to allow him to...
The old catch-all phrase, Dr. Haney, seriousness of offense. Man, Dr. Haney, that's pure garbage. Because I'm going to tell you why. Because if my crime was serious enough to get me locked up, you know what I'm saying? It's going to always be serious. When I die, it's going to be serious.
It's always a serious place. Just the very fact that you've committed a crime is a serious offense. Okay, well, and so we're getting ready for our second commercial break here. And then we'll give you an opportunity to further develop some of those ideas in reference to the system. But it does appear that the parole board has a tremendous amount of power, but it does not seem as if they're willing to work with individuals to allow them the opportunity and the privilege to take advantage. And of course, we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. The topic is